Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. I'm joined on the podcast today by Monica Chenault-Kilgore, author of the debut novel Long Gone, Come Home. Best-selling writer Bryn Turnbull wrote about the novel. Monica Chenault-Kilgore's Long Gone, Come Home is a big-hearted story of perseverance, family, and ambition set against the backdrop of the Great Depression and the racial intolerances of the early 20th century. And Bertie Chenault-Kilgore has created an unforgettable heroine whose resilience and determination will resonate long after you finish reading. Monica, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for having me.
Absolutely. Well, if someone hasn't yet heard about your novel, Long Gone, Come Home, how would you describe the novel?
Well, Long Gone, Come Home is a fictional coming-of-age drama that's told through the lens of a young woman who overcomes multiple dilemmas while searching for her missing husband during the 1930s to early 40s. The story traces her experiences as she travels from a small farm town in Kentucky to the big cities of Chicago, Illinois, and Cincinnati, Ohio. It's part adventure, part romance, with a touch of mystery, with a backdrop of the emerging jazz era, the vestiges of the Great Depression, the ramp up to World War II, and the progression of the civil rights movement.
Well, do you remember the original idea or impetus that led you to writing Long Gone, Come Home?
Oh, wow. It went through tons of transformation. Jeff, this is my debut novel, but it didn't start off as being a novel. Many, many years ago, I was trying to do a nonfiction kind of interview with women from at different ages, multiple generational women, and girls, to talk about their dreams, to talk about their lives, how their lives turned out, were their expectations met as they grew older and started their family. So I wanted to have, stories of folks from across the nation, because I've lived in the Midwest, on the East Coast, on the West Coast. And my goal was to actually, have a series of, interviews with different women to share what we have in common, regionally, despite our regional differences and our generational differences. So I started interviewing, different folks that I knew. And one woman that I interviewed was a friend of my mother's. We called her Nanny, but her name was Bertie. And she was such a bon vivant. She was just, she was an older woman. At the time I interviewed her, she was in her, approaching her 90s. And she told just lively stories about her life in Kentucky, the many loves of her life and things like that, and the disappointments. And so from my nonfiction project, which really wasn't, I just wanted to write. So it wasn't, deeply rooted. And after speaking with Bertie, I was like, oh, wow, my imagination started to run rampant. And I said, I can take her story and just keep it moving and, write a fictional piece about a woman who discovers herself as she lives her life from the small farm towns through big cities, becoming an entrepreneur, becoming a mother, and, suffering love and great love and loss. So it just evolved from there.
And was there a specific moment where you basically decided, oh, I'm going to write this fictionally as opposed to nonfiction?
Well, this was back in the day. So I was, I was recording my interviews with Bertie. And then when I was listening to the recordings and she was talking about some of the things that occurred in her life, I was like, oh, wow, what if this happened? And what if this happened? And it, I'm a writer. So, and, I come from, reading multiple fairy tales when I was a child. So my imagination just said, oh, wow, let's just write a story, about Bertie. But the story Long Gone Come Home isn't really about the real Birdie, but she was the, the impetus for all of the things that happened. And the rest was organic, you know, imagination.
Sure. Well, once you had finished writing, excuse me, once you had finished writing the novel, what was your path to publication and finding a publisher?
Oh my gosh. Now, it was tremendous. And it wasn't at all what I anticipated, of course, but I love telling this story. So once I got to a certain point and I thought the novel was the best thing ever, not quite yet, but I thought it was, I set out to query for agents and things like that. And of course, in my mind, I thought everyone who came across this manuscript would just love it. They would love it so much. They just, yes, Monica, they'd throw money at me. They'd hoist me on their shoulders and say, this is the best thing ever. However, because very quickly I learned that was not the case. So when I sent it out to query, I got a ton of rejections. And I mean a ton of rejections.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew this because I knew the story wasn't going to be, it wasn't for everyone. But no after no after no came. And I was like, okay, let's try this. So I revamped all kinds of things. I revamped the query. I revamped the story. I did all kinds of things to change to try to get it through the door. But I got close to 100. I should say a little over 100 rejections. But then I said, you know what? This has got to happen. This story, in my heart of heart, I knew it had to happen. I kept pushing and kept pushing. And ultimately it did happen. So I always tell people, do not, turn away from your dream. It can happen. Every no is one step closer to yes. So you got to keep it moving. Learn what you need to learn. Keep your, eyes open. Don't take it personal. Revamp and shift as you learn, but you got to keep going because, like I said, after 100 rejections, there was a thing right there at the end, and I was able to get through it.
That's wonderful. Well, it is a historical novel. What kind of research did you do as you were writing the novel?
Oh, it was fun stuff. Of course, you go through all you can on the internet. And of course, you spend hours and hours and hours chasing little, stories. But I can say what was most helpful was, going to the library. I'm an old school girl. I love the libraries and just looking at old newspapers. I mean, the newspapers that they had and reading different stories during that era. And they were written, I have a journalism background and, I went through, the Ohio State School of Journalism and learned how to properly, write newspaper articles. But back in the 30s and, around that time, newspaper articles were written with such flair. They were just entertainment. There were stories, about, society issues, people that jumped through windows, poisoned their spouse, and they were just written. I mean, it was just, of course, again, the creativity and imagination jumped in, so, looking through those old newspapers, gave me the tone of the times, but also helped spark the imagination to let me know where my story went through. So, going through all kinds of libraries throughout, New Jersey, went through Rutgers University, I went over to Harlem, to the New York, to look through at the Schomburg. That was helpful as well. And just went from there,
Wow, that's great. Well, you write about jazz in the novel. Do you listen to music while you're writing?
Oh my gosh, music is my life, basically. There's always music on somewhere. I grew up in a household. I mean, of course, I wasn't there in the 30s and 40s, but, my mom loved music. So there was always a soundtrack playing in the background that was either signaling us to be quiet or, just signaling us to, do your homework or whatever. There's always music, and basically jazz. I grew up with the Modern Jazz Quartet and Ramsey Lewis, and, also the classics. My mom took us to the symphony. So, I have an interest in classical music as well. Jazz music is my jam, so to speak. I love to hear, even the contemporary jazz, but, I'm into the classics, Miles Davis and the like. So music, it kind of gives me, the energy. So I listen to music all the time, and I incorporate that in all my writing because it kind of sets the tone. I have a soundtrack for, love, and I have a soundtrack for even dinner, whether it's a big dinner or a small dinner. So I love music, and I try to incorporate it and a little bit of music history in everything that I write.
That's great. Well, what writing advice would you offer for those who are working on their own stories or novels?
Oh, I really believe there's so many stories out there, and if someone feels the need to write, they need to write it and get it out there. One bit of advice I tell people is that to write without judgment. Because a lot of folks feel that, oh, I can't possibly write a story because, I can't write it. Or it doesn't look right. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't look like what I've read or look like what I know. But you have to start writing without judgment and just get those thoughts on a page. And keep writing, commit to, even journaling. Look at that on a daily basis. Set aside time to write something down, and don't judge it. Don't judge it as good, bad, or indifferent, but just keep on writing, and the flow will come. You'll find ideas that you've written about that you can, take that ball and run on, so to speak. But the key is just to write and not judge what you write, and to keep it going on a regular basis. I mean, I don't write linearly. Long Gone Come Home was not written like chapter by chapter by chapter. There was some poetry that I was writing that I did years ago without thinking about it going into a book, but it ended up in the story because it was most appropriate for that time. I could have been sitting on a beach and just, looking at the dolphins out in the water, which I wish I was now, but I'm not. But something like that would spark a story, and I'd write it. It didn't have a beginning or an end, but guess what? It made its way in some context in the story. So just keep writing. Your pieces don't have to go anywhere. It just has to be your thoughts or your prayers. But put it down. Don't judge it, and keep it going. Allow yourself that open berth to write and write some more.
And what was the editing process like for you for the novel once you did find a publisher?
Oh, that was interesting, and I just feel so blessed to have had such a wonderful editor, Lynn Raposo. I'll give her a little shout out because she did an excellent job. Of course, like I said, I just wrote from the heart, and wrote in bits and pieces, and put things together in a way I thought it worked. So, of course, when I turned in the manuscript to the editor, Lynn said, "You know what? You're starting in the wrong place. Move this here." I mean, she was the mechanic and put things in order so that the story could flow and could move. Some things, I scratched my head at, and some things I was like, oh, I get it. Now I see. So it was a process where I had to keep an open mind. I had to let some things go. Of course, I love every word, every phrase, every piece, every character. But the editor said, you know what, move this around here, take this character out. And I ultimately did see her wisdom and how to, put this together, because it's like a recipe. So we're trying to get that perfection in terms of the dessert that we're making that tastes the best. And the editor was able to, put that all together. And I had to keep an open mind about it. There was a time where, the editor said, we got to lose a character. And I had to fight for one character. I was like, no, they've got to stay. And I won that battle. But most parts of the editing process worked very well as I was able to kind of knit it together along with my editor, who I really trust.
That's great. Well, have you started working on another novel?
I have. I'm in the midst of doing that. We're in the midst of edits for another story that takes place in the 1920s. This is also a story of historical fiction. It goes along the vaudeville circuit. It's about a woman who is like thrust into the, the business and wants to become a vaudeville star. And she goes through a lot of, hurdles to get to that point. It's also kind of a collection of adventure, mystery, and it's quite a trek. Right now, the title was Cakewalk. So I'm looking forward to bringing that into the world.
That sounds fun. Well, what novels have you read recently that you enjoyed?
Well, right now, I wish I could read more. I mean, that's been my happy place, but I've been so busy with,
Sure.
of course, Long Gone, Come Home, and in writing Cakewalk and getting that out. So I haven't had as much time as I'd like to really, really read. I've started bits and pieces here, like I'm reading right now. What is Take My Hand by Dolan Perkin Valdez, which is it's not a lightweight novel, but very well written, and I'm kind of getting started with that as well. I have a few also I've started because I like mysteries and adventures and things like that. But I'm always my eyes always open for some new adventures. Oh, Black Candle Woman. I've been reading that also. I used to be like, I got to read a book from beginning to end and then start another book. But, as life has gotten so hectic, I'll start one and I'll stop it. Then I'll start doing something else and then I'll open. I'm sure I'm not alone in all that. So, just, stories that have phenomenal women and great tales of, overcoming challenges. That's, the stories that attract me.
Sure. Well, where can people find you online if they want to learn more about you and your debut novel?
Well, they can find me at the usual spots. I'm on Instagram at Monica C. Kilgore. I'm also on, you can find me on Facebook at author Monica Chenault-Kilgore. You can go to my website, which is, monicachenautkilgore.com. So I'm out there.
That's great. Well, again, we've been speaking to Monica Chenault-Kilgore, author of the debut novel, Long Gone, Come Home. The novel is available now, so go buy a copy. And Monica, thanks for doing this interview.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.